What's up everyone, welcome back to my channel. Look, fishermen spend their lives on the water. Commercial guys running 20-hour shifts in the middle of the ocean. Charter captains who have logged thousands of trips. Old-timers who have fished the same spot for 40 years. The people in these stories weren't weekend hobbyists with new gear. We're talking about professionals who know tides, weather patterns, where every sandbar sits, what lives in those waters. These are people who can read the ocean like you read a book, who have handled everything from storms to equipment failures to dangerous wildlife. What I'm about to share are 3 encounters that went beyond rogue waves or engine trouble. A commercial crab fisherman in Alaska who pulled up something in his pots that shouldn't exist at that depth. A charter captain in Louisiana who took clients into the bayou and discovered why locals never fish certain areas after dark. And a salmon fisherman in the Pacific Northwest who had a regular spot for 30 years until something started hunting from beneath his boat. Some details have been changed because these are still active fishing grounds, but what happened on those waters, that's real. Here's the thing about being a professional fisherman. You know your waters, you know what swims there, what the bottom looks like, how the currents move. You've pulled up thousands of catches, seen every species that lives in your area. So when something comes up that you can't identify, when something behaves in ways that break every pattern you've learned over decades, you can't dismiss it. Because the water is your profession, your expertise, and something is down there that shouldn't be. If you're new here, hit subscribe. We tell real stories from people who lived through them. And after you hear what these fishermen encountered in waters they thought they knew everything about, you'll understand why some fishing spots have unofficial boundaries that never make it into navigation charts. This happened in October 2021. I'm Marcus Reed. I was 47 at the time, been a commercial crab fisherman out of Dutch Harbor for 22 years. Over 500 trips into the Bering Sea, most of them in conditions that would terrify normal people. But when you grow up on the water, when you've spent 2 decades learning every trench and ridge on the ocean floor, the sea becomes predictable. You know the risks, weather, equipment, failure, exhaustion. I had 200 pots down about 180 miles offshore, depths around 900 feet. This was my prime spot, where I'd been pulling king crabs successfully for over a decade. My crew and I were 3 days into pulling pots when we brought up number 147. The pot came up normally, hydraulics working fine, no problems with the line, but when it broke surface, I knew immediately something was wrong. The weight was off, not lighter like an empty pot, heavier, much heavier than any crab catch, and there was a smell. Even through the freezing salt air and fish guts, I could smell something that made my stomach turn. That pot should have had maybe 200 pounds of crab. What came up was twice that weight, and it wasn't crab. Inside the pot was a mass of tissue, pale gray-white, rubbery texture. The thing was moving, contracting slowly, appeared partially alive. Weight was probably 400 pounds, filled the entire pot, oozing through the bars. The smell got worse when it hit air. My crew was gagging, eyes watering. This wasn't any species I'd seen in 22 years of fishing. The tissue didn't match anything, not whale, not squid, not any marine life I knew. Texture was like combination of jellyfish and shark, but wrong. Surface showed what might be eyes or sensors, milky white, no pupils. Appendages or tentacles wrapped through the pot bars with sucker-like ends. The thing reacted to light, contracting away. It was aware, demonstrating intelligence, and the tissue was warm, over 70 degrees. Nothing should be warm at 900 feet down. I checked GPS, pot was exactly where I'd said it, hadn't drifted. I reviewed sonar from when we deployed the pots 48 hours earlier. Recording showed something large on the bottom, a mass approximately 30 feet across, moving slowly. That mass wasn't there when we first set the pots. It had arrived after we left. Pot 148 came up with the same issue, deformed, different tissue mass inside. Pot 149 was deformed and empty, all bait gone, bars showing scoring like acid had touched them. Pots 150 through 155, 6 consecutive pots, all showed the same pattern, all contaminated or destroyed. I realized something was targeting our pot line specifically. Whatever it was had moved along our grid, hitting pots in sequence. The thing wasn't just scavenging bait, it was investigating the pots themselves. Sonar showed the large mass was still down there, positioned under our remaining pots. The shape was wrong, too big for any whale, and it was moving against the current. The mass appeared to be following our boat as we retrieved pots. I radioed other boats in the area. No one else was reporting similar issues. This thing was focused on us specifically. Then our electronics started failing. GPS showing incorrect position, jumping miles off our actual location. Satellite phone developed heavy static during calls. Radar showed ghost images that disappeared. The compass was spinning slowly, magnetic interference increasing. Sonar showing depth changes that were impossible for flat ocean floor. Electrical systems flickering, lights dimming, equipment resetting without reason. I decided to keep retrieving pots rather than cutting the lines. Each pot costs $800. 200 pots meant $160,000 in equipment. I couldn't afford to lose that investment. My crew wanted to abandon everything and leave immediately. I overruled them. We needed to assess the damage, see how many pots were affected. That was a mistake. Pot 160 came up completely destroyed. The bars were ripped apart from the inside. Whatever did this had the strength to tear half-inch steel bars like paper. Inside was more tissue, but also something else, structures that looked like bone but weren't quite right. As the pot sat on deck, the tissue mass started moving more actively. Appendages extending, feeling around, searching. One tentacle-like limb extended toward my deckhand Jake's boot. Jake jumped back. The limb followed his movement, tracking him. It was watching us. I grabbed a gaff hook and struck the limb. The thing recoiled instantly. Where the gaff hit, there was no blood, just clear fluid, and the smell got even worse. The mass in the pot started making sound, a low-frequency vibration you felt more than heard. The sound caused immediate nausea in all of us. Pressure built in our heads. Jake got a nosebleed that wouldn't stop. Then sonar showed the main mass below moving rapidly toward the surface, rising from 900 feet at impossible speed. Something huge was ascending, coming up to meet us. The thing broke surface 50 feet. From the boat, it was enormous, over 40 feet across. Pale, translucent in parts, covered in what looked like sensory organs all over its surface. The shape was amorphous, constantly shifting, hard to focus on directly. Hundreds of appendages of varying sizes extended from the main body. Some reached toward our boat, testing, exploring. The entity floated like a jellyfish but moved with clear purpose and intelligence. Eyes or sensors covered the surface, tracking each crew member individually. I realized the pots hadn't been randomly contaminated. The entity had examined each one methodically, sequential inspection. It had placed tissue samples deliberately, testing us, studying us. The pot destruction was a message, showing us its capability. I checked my logs. This fishing spot had shown decreased crab yields for the past 5 years. Other fishermen had quietly abandoned this area. I'd never asked why, just happy to have less competition. Now I understood. The crab had left because something else moved into this territory, something that didn't want us here. The entity began circling our boat, maintaining a perfect 100-foot diameter circuit. It moved against 20-foot swells effortlessly, keeping exact distance. Appendages occasionally broke water, reaching up 15 or 20 feet. Each time we moved the boat, the entity adjusted position instantly. It was testing us, appendages touching our hull gently, feeling the structure. Where the appendages touched, paint dissolved, metal showed corrosion. This thing was acidic or caustic, breaking down the boat's hull. All of us were feeling physical effects, nausea, headaches, vision problems. Jake was vomiting over the rail continuously. Louis had a severe nosebleed that wouldn't stop, soaking through towels. Our engineer Carl reported system failures below deck. Pumps weren't working correctly. I felt pressure behind my eyes, ringing in my ears, getting louder. The entity was affecting us physically, possibly through sound or radiation we couldn't detect. I started the engine and tried to move away. The boat moved, but the entity followed, maintaining exact distance effortlessly. I increased speed to 8 knots. The thing kept pace without apparent effort. It wasn't swimming, it was propelling itself some other way. I changed direction. The entity cut across our path and repositioned ahead of us. It was herding us, controlling our movement. We weren't escaping, we were being guided. Sonar showed we were being pushed toward deeper water, the continental shelf drop-off. Ocean floor went from 900 feet to over 5,000 feet at the edge. The entity was driving us toward the deep, toward its actual habitat. I checked charts and found something I'd never noticed. Multiple fishing boats had disappeared in this area over the past decade. All vanished without mayday calls, no wreckage found. Coast Guard classified them as weather-related, assumed the boats went down fast. But the pattern matched. All disappeared while pulling pots in this exact zone. This thing had been hunting fishing boats for years, taking them to the depth. The entity's behavior changed. It stopped circling and swam directly at our boat. Speed increased, appendages spreading out like a net, trying to surround us. My crew panicked. Jake suggested abandoning ship in survival suits. I knew that was death. Water was 40 degrees, hypothermia would kill us in 15 minutes, and the entity would catch us easily in the water. I ordered the crew to cut all remaining pot lines. We lost $80,000 worth of equipment, but reducing drag might let us gain speed. As the lines were cut, the boat surged forward. The entity seemed frustrated. It intensified the attack, appendages lashing at the boat violently. One appendage came over the rail and landed on deck near Lewis. Where it touched, metal hissed and smoked. I hit it with a fire extinguisher. The thing recoiled but returned immediately. More appendages came over the rail. The boat was being grabbed from multiple points. Hull sensors showed breaches. The corrosion had created small holes. Water was coming in. Pumps were working but losing the battle. The boat was slowly taking on water. The entity was trying to sink us right there at the shelf edge, drag us down to the depths where no one would find evidence. Jake radioed a mayday, gave our position, tried to describe what was attacking us. Coast Guard responded, but they were confused, asking if we'd hit a whale. Jake shouted that this wasn't a whale, it was something else. The radio died completely. The entity seemed to understand we'd called for help. It intensified the attack, trying to prevent rescue, ensuring no witnesses. The boat was listing 15 degrees, water in the hold accelerating. The entity had multiple appendages wrapped around the hull, pulling down. I estimated 20 minutes before we went under completely. I made a decision. Full throttle toward shallow water, drag the entity with us. It was counterintuitive, but our only chance. The entity clearly preferred deep water. Shallow water might make it release us. Engine at maximum power, we moved at 3 knots instead of usual 12, fighting the entity's weight. Each foot toward shallow water was a struggle, fuel burning rapidly. The entity's grip tightened, more appendages wrapping the hull. The hull groaned, metal stressed beyond limits, rivets popping. Jake reported flooding increasing, multiple breach points. Pumps couldn't keep up. Water was 4 feet deep in the hold and rising. We had maybe 10 minutes before the boat lost buoyancy entirely. Sonar showed we were 2 miles from shallow shelf, 400 feet depth. I spotted a shallow ridge, an underwater mountain at 200 feet depth. If we could reach it, the entity might be exposed in light water, vulnerable. I changed course, heading directly for the ridge. All or nothing gamble. The entity shifted its grip, trying to stop our direction change. The boat heeled over 30 degrees, nearly capsizing from the thing's weight. I kept throttle maxed, steering by feel since the compass was useless. 1 mile to the ridge. The boat was at critical list, rail underwater, flooding critical. The entity made that sound again, low frequency vibration. The entire boat shook. All of us were bleeding from our ears now. Jake passed out below deck. Lewis dragged him up to open air. Carl said the engine was overheating, might seize up. We hit shallow water, 300 feet depth. The entity suddenly released its grip. All appendages retracted simultaneously. The thing pulled away from the boat, sinking rapidly back to depth. It was fleeing shallow water, actively avoiding it. I realized it couldn't handle the pressure change or light levels. The thing was adapted for abyssal zones. Shallow water hurt it somehow. Our boat was still flooding but freed from the entity's weight. We limped toward land at 5 knots. The entity circled at a distance, staying in deep water, refusing to pursue into shallows. It let us go, message delivered. This was its territory. We trespassed and survived only because we'd run to shallow water. Pumps slowly gained on the flooding. Water level stabilized. Engine temperature dropped. I plotted course for nearest harbor, 90 miles away. Radio started working again. I called Coast Guard, reported we were taking on water. I didn't mention the entity. They wouldn't believe it. They'd think we were delusional from hypothermia or something. Rescue vessel was dispatched but 4 hours away. We needed to keep the boat afloat. Crew took shifts manually pumping, supplementing electric pumps. We barely stayed afloat but made it to rescue range. Coast Guard boarded, helped with pumps, stabilized the situation. Officers saw the damage. Hull corrosion, acid burns on deck, melted paint. They asked what happened. I said we hit a submerged object, maybe a chemical spill. The evidence of the appendages we'd hosed off the deck washed away during the crisis. Tissue samples from the pots I'd thrown overboard during the attack. Nothing left. Coast Guard classified it as a navigation accident, collision with debris. The boat was towed to Dutch Harbor. Hull damage was assessed at $200,000 for repairs. Insurance investigator was suspicious. Corrosion pattern wasn't consistent with any collision. Metal analysis showed chemical composition they couldn't identify, but without clear cause, insurance paid as navigation accident. All 200 pots were lost, $160,000 gone, plus the season's crab catch we'd never make. The financial damage was devastating. Repair costs plus lost equipment plus lost income meant bankruptcy. I had to sell the boat, couldn't afford repairs, and continue fishing. My 22-year fishing career ended that day. I couldn't go back to the Bering Sea. Psychological trauma was too severe, nightmares about the entity. Can't handle deep water anymore. My crew was similarly affected. Jake quit fishing entirely, moved to Montana, works inland now. Louis still fishes, but only near shore, won't go beyond sight of land. Carl works on the docks maintaining boats, but won't go back to sea. All four of us have PTSD. None of us talk about what really happened that day. I researched after the incident, found 8 boats that disappeared in that area over 10 years. All were pulling crab pots, all vanished completely, no wreckage ever found. Families never got answers, whether records showed calm seas when several boats disappeared. The pattern was clear once you knew to look for it. Crab yields had been decreasing in that zone for 15 years. Experienced fishermen had been quietly avoiding the area. Old-timers knew something was wrong. Younger guys like me didn't listen. I spoke with Aleut elders after the incident. They weren't surprised. Their stories go back centuries. Something in the deep trench, something that protects its territory. They described it as a shapeshifter, many-armed, coming from beyond the continental shelf. It takes boats that intrude. Drags them to depth, no survivors. The elders said warnings were given when commercial fishing expanded into deeper waters, but the fishing industry didn't respect traditional boundaries. They kept pushing deeper into areas that should have been left alone. That section of the Bering Sea is now quietly avoided by most commercial fishermen. Not officially closed, but experienced captains steer clear. Fishing maps show the zone as poor yields, but the real reason is fear. Occasional new captain sets pots there, usually loses equipment. Some boats still vanish. One in 2022, another in 2023. No trace found. Coast Guard maintains disappearances are weather-related, but the fishing community knows. Something down there hunts trespassers. A year after the incident, I received a package at my home. No return address, postmarked from Dutch Harbor. Inside was one of my pot buoys, distinctive orange with my boat number. It was from pot 147, the first contaminated pot we retrieved. Impossible because I'd thrown that buoy overboard during the entity attack. The buoy was covered in the same tissue residue, same smell, somehow preserved. Attached was a handwritten note, "Stay shallow." The handwriting matched my own perfectly, like I'd written it myself, but I never wrote that note, never saw it before. The entity or something else had returned the buoy with a warning. Message was clear. I'd been allowed to leave once. I wouldn't be allowed again. I mounted that buoy in my garage as a reminder to never return to deep water. Some nights I wake up smelling that smell, ammonia and decay. I know the entity is still down there, waiting, hunting. The Bering Sea has depths humans don't understand, can't imagine. Commercial fishing touches the surface, but things live far below. Ancient things that don't want to be disturbed, caught, or studied. I fished for 22 years thinking I knew the ocean. I learned in one day that the ocean has secrets that should stay secret. Some catches should never come to surface. Some waters should never be fished, and the deep protects itself. This happened in September 2022. I'm Anton Thibodeaux, 52, born in Terrebonne Parish, Louisiana, raised on the bayou. My family's been fishing these waters for 7 generations, going back before Louisiana was even a state. 28 years I've been running charter fishing, showing tourists and out-of-state folks where the redfish run. September 2022, I got a booking from 4 guys from Texas, businessmen types, wanted the real bayou experience. They specifically requested night fishing, said they'd pay triple my normal rate to go out after dark. Triple rate was good money, and I'd done plenty of night charters before. We set out from the dock around 7 p.m., sun just setting, boat loaded with gear and cold drinks. Clients were friendly, excited, kept asking about gators and snakes like tourists do. I took them through the main channels heading toward my usual night fishing spots, but they weren't satisfied with the usual spots. They wanted to go where locals fish, away from where other charter boats go. Said they could fish tourist spots at home, wanted authentic Louisiana. So I made a decision I'll regret for the rest of my life. I took them into the back bayou, past where the channels narrow, into areas I usually avoided. My grandfather warned me about those channels, said the old people knew certain water you don't fish, especially after dark, but I thought I knew better. 28 years on the bayou, I figured I'd seen everything, knew what was real and what was superstition. That night taught me the old people who spoke French and knew the bayou before tourists came weren't superstitious. They were smart. The back channels are different from the main bayou. Narrower, darker cypress trees so thick the moonlight barely reaches the water. Spanish moss hangs so low you have to duck sometimes. The water is black, not just dark, but completely black, tannin stained from the swamp. You can't see 6 inches below the surface. My clients loved it, saying this was the real deal, authentic Louisiana. They were taking pictures, drinking beer, having a great time. I navigated by memory and feel. These channels all look the same, easy to get lost if you don't know the landmarks. A bent cypress here, a particular stand of tupelo there. We were maybe 4 miles into the backwater when I noticed things were too quiet. In the bayou there's always sound, frogs, insects, birds, something. But this area was silent, complete silence except for my boat engine and the water moving. I slowed down, suddenly uneasy. One of my clients, guy named Steve, asked why we were stopping. I told him I was looking for a good spot to anchor and fish, but really I was trying to remember exactly where we were. The landmarks looked wrong. I should have been able to see a particular dead cypress that marked the boundary of where locals fish. That tree was planted there decades ago by my grandfather's generation as a warning, but I couldn't find it in the darkness. I cut the engine, let the boat drift while I got my bearings. My clients started setting up their rods, excited to fish. I was about to tell them to wait when I smelled something. Sweet and rotting, like flowers left too long in a vase mixed with spoiled meat. In the bayou, you smell decay all the time, it's natural. But this was different, stronger, wrong somehow. Steve cast his line. Before I could tell him to reel it back in, something hit it hard. His rod bent nearly in half. He shouted with excitement, thinking he'd hooked a big redfish or maybe a bull red. Started fighting whatever was on his line, but the way it moved was wrong, not like a fish running or diving. This pulled straight down with constant pressure, like something was slowly swimming toward the bottom, dragging the line. Steve fought it for maybe 2 minutes before his line went slack. When he reeled in, the leader was gone, not broken, gone, cut clean like someone took scissors to it. Monofilament line doesn't cut clean, it frays when it breaks. This was severed. Steve was already tying on a new leader, wanted to catch whatever did that. I told him to wait, let's try a different spot, but his buddies were already casting, not listening to me. All 3 of their lines got hit within seconds of each other, all 3 showing the same pattern, hard strike, straight down pull, then leader cut clean. They were excited, thought they'd found a school of something big. I knew better. Nothing in the bayou takes bait like that. Nothing cuts line that clean. And 3 simultaneous strikes, that's coordinated, that's intelligent behavior. I started the engine, told them we needed to move, try different water. Steve protested, said this spot was perfect, they were getting bites. I told him those weren't bites, I wanted them hooking. Something in my voice made them listen. I started backing the boat, trying to turn around in the narrow channel. That's when I realized the channel had changed, the way we came in. I couldn't find it. The cypress trees seemed denser, growing closer together. The passage we'd used was gone, or I'd gotten completely turned around. I tried 3 different openings between the trees. All led to dead ends, shallow water choked with stumps. We had to back out each time. My clients were getting nervous now, asking if I was lost. I told them no, just finding the best route out, but I was lying. I was lost in waters I'd known my entire life. That doesn't happen unless something wants you lost. Then the boat lights started flickering. Battery was fine, alternator was fine, but the lights kept dimming and brightening. In the darkness, when the lights dimmed, I could see other lights, small lights, maybe a dozen of them in the trees around us. They looked like lanterns, the old kind, giving off yellow-orange light. They'd appear when our lights dimmed, disappear when our lights brightened. My clients saw them too. Steve asked if those were other boats. I told him no, there were no other boats back here. No one fished these channels. The lights in the trees started moving, floating through the air, weaving between the cypress trunks. They were following us as we tried to find our way out. Each light moved independently, but they stayed together as a group, keeping pace with our boat. One of the clients, guy named Robert, said maybe there were fishermen with lanterns walking the shore. I looked at where the lights were. There was no shore there, just water 4 feet deep and thick cypress knees. No one was walking there. Those lights were floating on their own. The smell got worse, flowers and rot, and now something else, like sulfur or matches being struck. My clients weren't having fun anymore. They wanted out, wanted to go back. I told them I was trying, but I couldn't find the channel. Every opening looked wrong. The bayou had changed or was changing, closing in on us. Steve said that was impossible. Water doesn't just rearrange itself. I told him he was right. It was impossible, but it was happening anyway. That's when we heard the singing. A woman's voice, beautiful, singing in French. Old French, the kind my grandmother spoke. I couldn't make out all the words, but I recognized some. She was singing about the water, about going down into the dark water. The voice came from ahead of us, down a channel I hadn't tried yet. My clients asked if that was another boat, someone who could show us the way out. Before I could answer, Steve grabbed a spotlight and shined it toward the voice. The light hit a figure standing in the water ahead. A woman in a white dress, water up to her waist, long dark hair covering her face. She was facing us, still singing, voice beautiful and clear. Steve called out to her, asked if she knew the way back to the main channel. She stopped singing. Her head tilted to one side, wrong angle, too far. Then she started walking toward us, not wading through the water, walking on top of it. Her feet weren't touching the water surface. She was above it, walking on nothing. I threw the engine in reverse, started backing away fast. The woman in white kept coming, gliding over the water faster than we could reverse. Her face was still hidden by hair, but I could see her hands now. The fingers were too long, joints bending in too many places. Robert was shouting, Steve was cursing, all of them yelling for me to go faster. But the channel was too narrow to turn around. We could only reverse. The woman reached the front of the boat. She placed her hands on the bow. Where she touched, I heard sizzling like water on a hot skillet. The fiberglass was melting under her fingers. She pulled herself up onto the bow slowly, deliberately. Her hair fell away from her face, and I saw why she'd kept it covered. Her face was wrong, beautiful features, but the proportions were off. Eyes too far apart, mouth too wide, skin pale like something that'd been underwater for weeks. She smiled and her teeth were all pointed, filed to sharp points like a shark. She spoke, same beautiful voice, same old French. I understood enough. She said we'd crossed into water that wasn't ours. This was her water, her place. We'd been warned, the boundaries were marked, but we came anyway. The price for trespassing was to join her in the dark water, become part of what lived here. She reached toward Steve. He swung his fishing rod at her. It passed through her arm like she was smoke or mist, no resistance. I remembered what my grandfather taught me. Catholic prayers, saints' names, specific words in French for protection. I started reciting loud and fast everything I could remember. The woman pulled back from Steve. She turned her wrong face toward me. Said the old words didn't work like they used to. The old protections were fading, but they still hurt her. I could see it. She hissed, showing all those pointed teeth. The lights in the trees surged brighter, all moving toward the boat now. I gunned the engine W. Heil still in reverse, boat moving backward fast through the narrow channel. Didn't care about hitting stumps, just needed distance. The woman stayed on the bow, melting holes in the fiberglass with her touch. More figures appeared in the water around us. Dozen or more, all in white, all walking on the surface, all coming toward the boat. My clients were panicking completely now, trying to hide in the center of the boat. I grabbed the blessed salt my grandmother made me keep on the boat. Old Cajun tradition, blessed by a priest, carried for protection. I never believed in it, but kept it to make her happy. I threw handfuls at the woman on the bow. She screamed when the salt hit her. Not a human scream, something else, high-pitched and horrible. She dissolved like sugar in water, form collapsing, melting into mist that blew away. The holes she'd melted in the bow stopped growing. The other figures in white stopped advancing. They watched from the water, circling but not approaching. I kept backing the boat, reciting prayers, throwing salt whenever they got close. The lights in the trees followed but stayed farther away. And finally I found it, the channel we'd come in through, suddenly visible like it had been there all along. I spun the boat and went forward full throttle, not looking back. We crashed through branches, hit stumps, didn't care, just needed to get out of those channels into the main bayou. Behind us I could hear that singing again, multiple voices now, all in old French, calling for us to come back. The boat engine started sputtering, trying to die. I coaxed it, prayed over it, kept it running by force of will. My clients were silent, holding onto the boat like their lives depended on it. We broke into the main bayou channel and the engine suddenly ran smooth. The lights behind us disappeared. The singing stopped. I looked back and the water was normal bayou, dark and quiet. My clients asked what the hell that was. I told them the truth. Those were things that live in the backwater. Things that have been there longer than any of us, longer than the state or the cities. Things the old people knew about and respected. We'd gone into their territory and they'd tried to keep us. We got back to the dock around 11 p.m. My clients got off the boat without saying a word, got in their truck and left. Never asked for their money back, never left a review, never mentioned the trip. I examined my boat in the dock lights. The bow had 12 handprint-shaped holes melted through the fiberglass. Each hole went through a quarter-inch of material like it was paper. No explanation for that kind of damage, no chemical that works that fast in that pattern. I filed an insurance claim, said I'd hit submerged debris that damaged the hull. They paid for repairs, but the surveyor said he'd never seen damage like it. Asked me multiple times what really happened. I stuck to my story, debris strike, random accident. He didn't believe me, but couldn't prove otherwise. Repairs cost $8,000, wiped out my savings. I never took another night charter in the bayou, only fish during day now, only in the main channels where other boats go. I tell clients I don't do night fishing anymore, make up excuses about permit restrictions. Real reason is I won't go into those waters after dark, won't risk crossing into territory that isn't mine. I talked to the old people after that night, the ones who still speak French, who remember the old ways. They weren't surprised, said I was lucky the salt and prayers worked, said the things in the backwater are getting bolder, the boundaries aren't respected anymore. Too many outsiders coming in, too many people who don't know the rules. The protections are fading because younger generations don't maintain them, don't believe. My grandfather's generation knew. They marked the boundaries, made offerings, said the prayers, showed proper respect. They knew certain channels weren't for fishing, certain areas belonged to something else. Modern folks call it superstition, call it foolish belief, but those modern folks are the ones who disappear sometimes. Fishermen who go into the back bayou and never come out. Boats found empty, drifting, no sign of what happened. The authorities blame gators or accidents or getting lost. The old people know better. There's a map in my grandfather's house, hand-drawn, showing the safe channels and the forbidden ones. The forbidden areas are marked in red ink with French words I had to translate. Les eaux des morts, the waters of the dead. Below that, instructions written in Old French. Don't fish there, don't cross at night, don't answer if you hear singing, don't look at the lights in the trees, and if you see a woman in white, pray and run. I have that map now framed in my house. I tried to show it to other charter captains, warned them. Most laughed, said it was folk tales and ghost stories. 2 captains listened. They're the ones who have been on the bay. You for decades who have heard things they can't explain. They thanked me for the warning and asked for copies. The young captains, the new ones who just bought boats and GPS units, they think they know everything. They'll learn the way I did, or they won't come back. That section of the bayou, 4 miles into the back channels past the marked boundaries, I won't go near it. During the day I can see where it starts. The water is darker, the trees are thicker, the sound changes. In daylight it just looks like deep swamp, but at night it's something else. Territory belonging to things that were here first and will be here long after we're gone. Things that tolerate us in the main channels but defend their water from intruders. I kept a handful of that blessed salt from my grandmother. Keep it in my truck now in a sealed jar, added to it with more blessed salt from the church. It's my insurance, my protection, proof that the old ways still work even if we don't fully understand them. Some nights I smell that flour and rot smell on the wind coming off the bayou. I know they're still there in the back channels waiting, and I know I'll never go back into those waters after dark. Some authentic experiences aren't worth the price. This happened in August 2023. I'm Bob Morrison, 61, retired high school teacher from the Olympic Peninsula. For 30 years I've fished the same spot on the same river every August during Chinook Run. It's about 5 miles upriver from the public access, requires a boat to get there so it stays empty. Most people fish the lower river where it's easy. My spot is a deep pool at a bend, surrounded by old-growth forest, peaceful as church. I've caught over 500 salmon there over 3 decades, watched eagles and bears fish alongside me, seen every season's changes. August 2023, I was out there opening day of season, 5 like always, fog on the water, absolute silence except for river sounds. Perfect morning. I'd made this trip 200 times before, same boat, same gear, same spot, but that morning something was different. The birds weren't singing. The water felt wrong, heavier somehow. And when I cast my line into the pool where salmon always held, something down there moved. Not a salmon, something much larger. I've fished long enough to know the difference between a salmon taking line and something else. Salmon run, they jump, they fight toward the surface. This thing pulled straight down with steady pressure. No runs, no jumps, just constant pull toward the bottom. I'd hooked into the bottom before, snagged logs or rocks, but this was different. This had weight that shifted, that adjusted when I adjusted. This was alive. My drag was screaming, line peeling off the reel. Whatever I'd hooked was big, over 100 pounds at least. I tightened the drag, tried to stop it. The thing didn't care, just kept pulling, steady and patient, like it was showing me how strong it was. My rod bent nearly double. I thought the line would snap or the rod would break, then it let go. Line went slack. I reeled in and found my entire leader was gone, bitten through, not frayed or broken, bitten. The teeth marks were clear and the remaining line, serrated edges, spacing too wide for any salmon. I tied on a new leader, cast again into a different part of the pool. Within seconds, another strike. Same pattern, immediate pull straight down, constant pressure, then release and bitten leader. I tried a third time, same thing. Whatever was down there was targeting my line deliberately, not feeding, playing, testing me, showing me it controlled this water now. I stopped fishing and just watched the pool. The water was dark, tannin stained from the forest, couldn't see more than a foot down, but I saw movement, something large circling beneath the surface. A shadow, maybe 15 feet long, moving in a pattern, circling my boat, staying just deep enough to remain indistinct. The shape was wrong for any fish, too thick through the body, moving wrong, undulating in a way that didn't match anything I knew. I'd fished this river for 30 years, knew every species, salmon, steelhead, sturgeon, even the occasional seal that came upriver. This wasn't any of those. The movement was serpentine, but the body shape was wrong. Parts of it broke the surface occasionally. I saw what might be a fin or limb, dark gray, covered in something that looked like scales, but also like skin. Texture reminded me of elephant hide, thick and wrinkled. I decided to leave, go try a different spot, started my outboard motor. The thing below reacted immediately. The water erupted beside my boat, huge displacement, something surfacing fast. I saw a head break the water just for a second. The size of a car hood, elongated snout, eye the size of a dinner plate. The eye focused on me directly, intelligent, aware. Then it sank back down before I could fully process what I'd seen. I gunned the motor, headed downriver fast, checked behind me constantly. The thing followed. I could see the wake it created, moving just below surface, keeping pace with my boat at 20 mph. It stayed with me for a mile, then suddenly it was gone, disappeared like it had never been there. I slowed down, heart pounding, trying to understand what I'd just encountered. I didn't go back to my spot for 3 days. Told myself I was being ridiculous, probably saw a seal or a big sturgeon, mind playing tricks in the early morning. But I knew that wasn't true. I'd seen what I'd seen. Something was in that pool that hadn't been there before. Something big enough and aggressive enough to claim my spot as its territory. 4th day, I convinced myself to try again. Maybe the thing had moved on, gone back downriver or out to sea. I arrived at my spot at dawn. The moment I cut the engine, I knew it was still there. The water was completely still, no rings from rising fish, no surface activity at all. The pool was dead, no salmon jumping, no smaller fish dimpling the surface. Everything had abandoned this section of river. I didn't even cast, just sat in my boat watching the water. The thing surfaced deliberately this time, slow and controlled, 30 feet from my boat. The head emerged, water streaming. G off and I got a clear look. The skull was massive, elongated, covered in dark gray skin with texture like old leather. Eyes on the sides of the head, yellow with black vertical pupils. Mouth slightly open, showing teeth, rows of them, serrated and curved backward like a shark but larger. The neck was thick, muscular, at least 3 feet in diameter. It watched me not like an animal watches, like a person watches, studying me, evaluating me. We stayed like that for maybe 30 seconds, locked in eye contact. Then it opened its mouth wider, showing all those teeth, and made a sound. Low-frequency rumble that I felt in my chest more than heard. Warning, threat, message clear. This water wasn't mine anymore. It was claiming territory, and I needed to leave. I started the motor, backed away slowly, not turning my back on it. The thing sank below surface, but I could see it following underwater. Shadow pacing my boat until I got a quarter-mile downriver. Then it turned back toward the pool, returning to what it now considered its hunting ground. I reported it, called Fish and Wildlife, told them I'd seen something unusual in the river, something big and potentially dangerous. The officer who took my report was polite but skeptical, asked if it might have been a seal. I said no, definitely not a seal. He asked if I'd gotten pictures. I admitted I hadn't, was too shocked to think about my phone. He said without evidence they couldn't investigate. Suggested I'd probably seen a sturgeon. They get pretty big and can look strange in certain light. I knew it wasn't a sturgeon. I'd caught sturgeon before, knew what they looked like. This was something else. I researched, tried to find any reports of similar sightings. Found old Native American stories from the tribes in this area. They talked about water spirits, serpents that lived in deep pools, guardians of the river. The descriptions matched what I'd seen. Long body, big head, intelligent, territorial. The stories said these things had always lived in the river, but stayed hidden, only revealing themselves when their territory was threatened. I found newspaper articles from the 1800s. Loggers reported seeing large serpents in Pacific Northwest rivers. Reports were dismissed as tall tales or misidentification, but the descriptions were consistent: 30-foot long, thick-bodied, head like a crocodile but larger, aggressive toward humans. Sightings dropped off in the 1900s as rivers got more developed. Things went deeper, stayed hidden, but apparently they never left. I went back one more time a week later. Told myself I needed to see if it was still there, if my spot was permanently lost. I brought my phone, determined to get evidence if I saw it again. I approached the pool slowly, quietly. The thing was there. I could see the disturbed water pattern, the shadow circling below. I raised my phone to film. The thing surfaced immediately, as if it knew what I was doing. It looked directly at the phone, directly at me, and that intelligence in its eyes was terrifying. It knew what a camera was. It knew I was trying to document it. It dove, creating a wave that rocked my boat. Then it came up underneath, hit the boat from below. Not hard enough to capsize me, but hard enough to throw me off balance. I dropped my phone, watched it fall into the water. The thing's head surfaced right where the phone went in. It looked at me again. Message received, no evidence, no pictures, no proof. I started the motor and left, haven't been back since. That was 3 months ago. I haven't fished that spot since August. 30 years of perfect mornings, 500 salmon caught, my peaceful retirement sanctuary gone, taken by something that decided that pool belonged to it now. I tried fishing other spots on the river, but it's not the same. That pool was special, was mine. Now it's occupied by something that won't share and won't leave. I talked to other fishermen, asked if anyone else had seen anything unusual upriver. Got mostly blank stares and suggestions I'd been drinking. But 2 older guys, both in their 70s, pulled me aside privately. They said they'd heard stories, things in the deep pools that come and go. One guy said his grandfather told him certain spots on the river were forbidden by the tribes, places where water spirits lived. Modern people ignored those warnings, fished wherever they wanted. But the spirits were still there, still territorial. I checked tribal records, talked to a cultural liaison at the local tribe. He confirmed without surprise. Said that section of river was traditionally avoided except for ceremonial purposes. The deep pool at the bend was known as a dwelling place for something they called Sisiotl in their language, guardian serpent, powerful and dangerous, not evil but protective of its territory. The tribe would make offerings, show respect, ask permission before taking salmon from that area. I'd been fishing there 30 years with knowing I was trespassing on sacred ground occupied by something real. The liaison said younger tribe members don't always know the old stories, and outsiders never knew at all. He said the Sisiotl had been quiet for decades, staying hidden as development increased, but something changed. Maybe population of its normal prey decreased, maybe it felt threatened by increased human presence, maybe it just decided to reclaim territory it had abandoned. Whatever the reason, it was back and it wasn't hiding anymore. I drive by the river access sometimes, see other fishermen heading upriver. Wonder if any of them go to my old spot if they encounter what I encountered. Haven't heard any reports, but people don't report things they can't explain. They convince themselves it was something normal, or they keep quiet to avoid being called crazy. I kept quiet for weeks before even telling my wife. She believes me, but she's relieved I'm not going back. Says 30 years was good run, time to find new hobbies. But I can't let it go. That spot was mine. I found it, fished it, protected it, kept it secret, and something took it from me. Something that has more right to be there than I do, according to the tribal history. Something that was there before the state, before the settlers, probably before the tribes themselves. An ancient thing that's been in these rivers since the Ice Age, hiding in deep pools, surfacing occasionally to remind humans that we don't control everything. I have dreams about it now. That eye, yellow and black, watching me with intelligence that shouldn't exist in something that lives underwater. That mouth full of teeth, opening wide in warning. And that feeling of being evaluated, judged, and found wanting. Found to be an intruder in territory that would never be mine no matter how many years I fished it. The river still calls to me. I still want to fish, still miss those August mornings in the fog, but I can't go back to that spot. Can't face that thing again, can't challenge something that made it clear I wasn't welcome. So I fish the lower river now, where it's crowded with other people, where the salmon are fewer and harder to catch. My private sanctuary is gone, occupied by something that won't negotiate and won't share. Sometimes I wonder if it was always there, hiding, tolerating my presence, or if it's something new that moved in recently. But based on the tribal stories, it was always there. I was the intruder, the trespasser, I just didn't know it. 30 years of perfect mornings were courtesy of something that allowed me to be there, and when it decided to reclaim its territory, there was nothing I could do but leave. That's the hardest part, knowing I have no recourse, no way to fight back, no authority to appeal to. Fish and Wildlife won't investigate without evidence. Tribal authorities say it's a spiritual matter, not their jurisdiction. And I can't get evidence because the thing knows what cameras are and won't allow documentation. I'm left with memories of something impossible, something that shouldn't exist but does. and the knowledge that my perfect spot is gone forever. I kept one thing, the last leader it bit through with the teeth marks still visible, kept it in my tackle box as proof, at least to myself, that I'm not crazy. The spacing between the teeth is 3 inches. No fish in this river has teeth that size or that spacing. It's physical evidence that something is out there, but evidence only I find meaningful. To anyone else, it's just a broken fishing line. Some mornings I stand at the river access and look upriver toward where my spot is. 5 miles up around the bend at the deep pool under the old growth forest. I wonder if it's still there, if it's permanent or temporary. Wonder if someday it'll leave and I can reclaim my spot. But I know I won't go back. Even if it left tomorrow, I couldn't fish there again. The memory of those eyes watching me, that intelligence evaluating me, that would never leave. The pool is haunted now, not by ghosts, but by something real and ancient and powerful. 30 years of perfect fishing ended in one August morning when something decided to remind me that the river belongs to itself, that humans are guests at best, intruders at worst, that there are older claims to these waters than mine, older residents than us. And sometimes those residents reclaim what was always theirs. My retirement dream was fishing that spot until I couldn't fish anymore. Instead, I lost it to something that's probably been there for thousands of years, that will be there long after I'm gone. Some territories can't be claimed, only borrowed, and eventually the real owner comes back.